How's everyone doing? Good. Sweet. Yes. No. Brain tanning part 3. We're going to get into probably one of the most important skills to survival in my book. No, it is. It really is. We're going to get into stone tool making. And I'm going to try and make as clear as possible one of the most mind-boggling skills that I've ever undertaken. But once you get it, it is as simple can be. It's a lot of fun. You learn a lot about yourself on this skill. You learn a lot about tracking and just so much. Like every other skill you learn here, it takes you in every direction in the skills world, physical and spiritual. Physical and spiritual. So, yeah, it's, God, I don't know if I can do that. From the diaphragm. So, yeah, it's a really fun skill. It's a simple skill once you take the time to understand it. It is one of my favorite skills and one of the most important skills in survival. Without this skill, we would probably not be where we are. We wouldn't have the hides that you have to wear as clothing. You wouldn't be able to get it off the animal. You wouldn't be able to carve the notch unless you found a jawbone or some other form of something to carve with. But without stones, you don't have a lot of opportunity to do some of the things that you need to survive. So it's a very, very important skill. And the basics is what I'm going to teach you today. And the basics will take you probably, if you were to sit down like I did and have the opportunity to nap whenever you wanted, you could probably, with what we're going to give you, not master it, but really have a good grasp and understanding and remove the flakes and things that you want in a couple of days once you know the key basis to it all and have an understanding of it. And that understanding really comes when you start experimenting. The stuff that I'm going to talk about confused the heck out of me early on, and it just took me breaking rocks to really understand it. And once I started understanding it and was running into walls, then it took, more breaking of rocks and talking to other people who flint knap to work through it or understand it. So it's a little complex. There's a lot of, physics involved in it, but it's just one little piece of physics that once you figure it out, you roll with it. I got to take my sweatshirt off. I'm already hot. So, the first thing I want to talk about are, the main and most important thing about flint knapping is understanding what the Hertzian cone is. Does anyone know what the Hertzian cone is? Good. So then I can tell you. Why people always ask me that? Hert with an E, Hertz, I-Z-O-N, Hertzion. Is that right? Hold on, it's got to be in this book. I spell it wrong every time. I'm no Hertzian cone. Hertzian cone. Don't ask me to spell anything again. It makes me feel smart. So, the Hertzian cone, a lot of you may have seen them in your travels, like at a bank or a drive-in window at McDonald's or something like that, where you see a small hole in a piece of plate glass, and then on the backside, there's a big hole, and it's shaped like a cone or a funnel. Has anyone ever seen that? All I know is I made a lot of them when I was a kid. BB gun? Yeah, BB gun in glass. Or some people who are hunters or use guns, bullet holes, small in going in, big coming out. Same thing. The Hertzian cone, I drew it up here. This is basically how it works. This is the most technical part of flint knapping. This is what flint knapping is based on, right here. This is it. These angles. You've got a force coming in. This is your BB. Hitting a flat surface will create this cone in glass or rock. If the rock is got a nice crystalline structure to it and is knappable, it will break like this. And it basically goes off at 130 degree angles from the force, and the cone is about 100 degree angle. Okay? And it will do this every time. Now, in relation to a stone, this is how much of it you're using. You're using just a portion of it. Very, very little. What? You're using very little of the actual cone to flint knap. And I'll be demonstrating this and you'll really understand it. This is... I just wanted to show you that out of this whole cone, you use this much of the cone to remove the rock. This portion here would be the rock. See, it's on, this is my rock. Rock. This is my rock. Okay, so out of this, you use just a portion of it. You're hitting it on the edge, and you are going to be removing a portion of the stone with that flake. So before I go into any more detail on how that works, I want to get into a little vocabulary in the flint knapping world. Things you're going to hear me say, and I want you to understand what they are when I say them so that you don't go, so what is that? Because I can get it all out right now, and then if I forget something, just write it down in your notebook, and at the end you can ask me, and we will, and I'll cover it. What you need for flint knapping is you need your stones. You need some sort of knappable stone. This here is a large piece of Coastal Plains chert from Georgia. Okay? Pretty much there's knappable stone, depending on your experience and skill level, everywhere. You can find something to make a stone tool out of, something to get a sharp edge on. That's what we're going to be trying to get to here today, is being able to produce a sharp edge. So this is a Coastal Plains chert. Off of this big rock, which is called a nodule, N-O-D something, nodule, U-L-E. So off of this nodule, you will remove spalls. Spalls are, this is a spall. It's a large flake. And spalls come in many sizes. When they get to a certain size, when I start doing work on this spall, I will be removing smaller flakes. They are the exact same thing, just on a smaller level, and people call them flakes. You could call them mini spalls if you want to be different. Out of those spalls, or flakes, depending on the size of the flake, you make bifaces, which means basically that they've been worked on both sides. Both faces have been worked. Flakes have been removed from both sides. Those bifaces, you can use them. You can use them for your sawing notches, processing meat if they've got sharp edges on them, trading, whatever. They found a lot of caches of just bifaces, and people would carry these around. They would go to a lithic source and reduce things down to this for the purpose of carrying and trading, because you're not going to be humping this thing around with you. All right, I gotta head down to my hunting grounds down south. It's getting cold. Hey, here, son. Ugh. That's not going to happen. So, from those bifaces, you're going to end up making your knife blades, spear points, atlatl points. All your tools are going to come from that. Adzes, axes, things like that. The tools involved in this process. After the bifaces and spalls, you're going to make your tools. You're going to make, I've already said it, but that's basically finished pieces. Okay, I got arrowheads, spear points, and atlatl points in there, some drill bits. So that's what basically, in the long run, that's what you're going to be shooting for. It took me probably a year before I made a knife blade, probably about 2 or 3 months before I made a serviceable arrowhead of knapping. I went through approximately 25 pounds of obsidian to understand this. I ordered 50 pounds, and I'm really a freak about things like this. I ordered 50 pounds. It came, and I weighed it. It was 51 and a half or something. I started knapping. When I understood it, I weighed it again, and I went through half of my stone. And then I started creating these. Before I started spalls, just to make spalls. Make efficient, good-shaped spalls. It took me 25 pounds. I studied under a guy after I came here and learned the basics and did my 25 pounds of obsidian. I went and studied under a man named Eric Callahan. He's probably one of the best flint knappers in the country. And he is basically a scientist when it comes to this stuff. And he journals everything about it. What a stone looks like when you abrade it 5,000 times. He's got a picture of it every 100, things like that. He's very scientific about it. Everything he does when it comes to primitive skills is scientific. And he's a major anthropologist, archaeologist kind of guy. But 25 pounds. When I went to his class, he said that he did classes. He would take students out to Glass Buttes, Oregon, where obsidian grows or grew. And being that they were at a lithic source that was just, I don't know what you call it, but you have so much of it, you're not going to use it up. He did a study, and he did that. He weighed out a bunch of rocks, gave it to each student, and then at the end, when they understood, he weighed it, and it took him, he said, an average of 23 pounds. So I am a little slower than the average person, and I am okay with that. So that's what I recommend doing, is breaking rocks. You're going to make gravel before you make something nice. Yeah. I'll get into that in the end. There's a good website guy out there that you can order this stuff from. The other types of stones, what you can get into is working slabs. These are slabs of different exotic rocks from around the world. This is from Australia. This is from Brazil. I don't know where that's from. But these are like different jaspers and agates and things from around the country. You can also work on plate glass. This is plate glass from the National Cathedral in D.C. I'm not going to tell you I got it. Big rock. But there, when you get into the plate glasses, you can see there's, awesome colors and stuff. I've got a finish point out of some of this in here. This nice blue one. When I'm done, y'all can come up and look at this stuff. So after you have your stones, you're also going to want to have tools. So I'm going to cover those. You're going to want, for this, hammer stones of all sizes, large to small, and every size in between. You're going to feel like people are going to think you're a nut when you have buckets and buckets of these rocks laying around. And like my parents think I'm a nut. They got a shed, and they got a brand new shed. I filled it up with my crap. I bought a house. As a gift, they bought me a shed so I could get my crap out of their shed. Well, I filled my shed up with rocks and sticks and things and hides and all this stuff. And then I was like, they're like, when are you going to get your stuff out? I'm like, well, I can't. They're like, why not? I was like, well, it's full of rocks and stuff. And they're like, we bought your shed to get our shed clean. I'm like, sorry. So I got two sheds. So hammer stones, they come in all different hardnesses and softnesses. They go, this is a sandstone from Pennsylvania. It's soft. I use this on obsidian. I don't do direct hitting with it. I do more of a grazing blow. I'll get into that later on. The harder stuff like quartzite, I use more on a direct level. You can use like granite and marble and things like that. I've seen people use granite rocks and they last for a really long time. So hammer stones is one of the tools. That is what you're going to use to knock off spalls, big spalls. All right, are hammer stones. Then there are antler billets. These come off of the bases of antlers on large and smaller ungulates. This is a moose billet. These are both moose billets. And length, width, weight, it all matters. And you have basically an assortment of those. Okay, in sizes from large to small. It's like a hammerstone. It's for percussion. I'll get into that. I'm just going to name these things, and then when I start using them, you'll see exactly what they're for. It's the base, usually, of the right where it connects to the head. This is right where it connected to the head is right under here. And usually the other parts of like a deer, or white-tailed deer, or elks and mule deers and stuff, they get a little porous in the middle. This is pretty much all solid bone right here, so you can. It's a great. It doesn't wear out real fast. It doesn't chip and stuff like that. It chips a little bit, but not much. When you get into the inner parts of the outer parts of the antlers, you've got an issue of it degrading quickly. You can still use them, but they're not ideal. There are also, I don't have any examples of them, you can use wood for billets. Wood would be used on some more coarser grained stones like argillites and quartzites and things like that. This antlers you can use on argillites and quartzites as well, but you would use big wooden billets further along in a reduction stages of the coarser stones. And I'll get into that more in a little while. There are also copper boppers, as people call them. It's the more readily available, not so environmentally friendly, but a lot of nappers, modern nappers, use copper billets. copper weighted billets or copper rods. I learned on copper. I got rid of copper because I wanted to be able to do this without copper. When I switched from copper back to antler, it was like starting all over again. The swing changed, the weight was different, everything was different, and it took me about 3 or 4 days to adjust. So just keep that in mind. Each type of percussion implement, which the billets and the hammerstones and the copper boppers are, they all have a different type of finesse to them or technique to using them. So be aware of that. The other tools that you would use are abraders or abrading stones. The abrading stone is for taking off where you remove a flake on a spall or on a nodule is very sharp. So you're going to want to abrade that so you're not cutting yourself while you're working it. And it also takes away, and I'm going to show you this too, it takes away when you take a flake off, it'll create a very thin edge, and you can't hit that thin edge because it'll crumble underneath the force. So you have to get rid of it by abrading it or lightly tapping it off and then abrading it. It's also, that thin edge is very deceiving. It'll make you think you have more of an area to hit when you don't, and it mentally will mess with you. Leg pads are very important. For not driving sharp flakes into your legs. These are sharp. They are very, very sharp. I bleed all the time when I do this. That's another thing you want to add to your toolkit is Band-Aids. Especially in the beginning, and especially if you're working obsidian. Obsidian it breaks on a molecular level. It's the sharpest stone out there. They use it for doing very fine tissue surgery, eye surgery, and things like that. Obsidian is out of Oregon. It's volcanic glass. It's in California. It's in South America. The next tool in the lineup would be pressure flakers, which you're not going to see me use too much today. These are not something you're going to use in basic flint knapping of getting just a sharp edge. This is for fine-tuning, making arrowheads and things like that, notching and what have you. Pressure flakers, this is a plastic rod with a copper tip in it. Copper was used in pressure flaking by indigenous people in this country. It has been found in archaeological records, so I am okay with using that at this point in my life, though a lot of people are still wanting, purists will use wood and antler for pressure flakers. All right, these are antler tines. These are the outside tips of the antlers, and these are great for pressure flaking. Another thing you would want in your tool bag is a hand pad to protect your palm if you're doing any work in your palm. Again, this you probably won't see me use too much today because this comes down to the finer parts where I'm working something small in my hand. You're going to see me working more large stuff.
What's that called?
Hand pads. Just leather hand pad. You may want to have a pair of safety glasses. I used to wear glasses when I napped. I've learned to not wear them, but I recommend wearing them, especially in the beginning. You will want to wear long pants and shoes and socks. I'll tell you, if you really get into this skill, you're going to sit around and you're going to be doing these flakes removal, and every time you hit off a big flake, little flakes come off too, and they go down, and they always go into your shoe. and you walk around on them. So you're going to want to empty your shoes out when you're done. Look at that. See, there's stuff already coming out of there. And I haven't even done anything. So that, and if your pants roll up around the bottom, you got to empty your cuffs. You want to brush off. You do not want to do flint knapping indoors at all. I don't care how much you love it and how cold it is. You do not want to do it indoors. Take a break for the winter and wait till the warm days come to do it, and do it outdoors. Because when you work this stone, like I said, you take off a big rock, a big spall off of there, little flakes come off. Not only do little flakes come off, but little dust flakes come off, and they become airborne, and they're microscopic, and they're light, and they float. And they float around for a little while, and you breathe, and they go into your lungs, and then they do to your lungs what you would do to a hide or to your bow drill kit. They will cut up, cause scar tissue, and give you a disease called silicosis. And it's not a good, one of the best flint knappers in the world died of it, 8 years ago. He was on oxygen, flint knapping to the last day, too. So he had silicosis. It was common in flint making, gun flint making, because they did that all indoors. And I guess that's when they learned what it was. But it's not it's a nasty thing. I wouldn't want to have it. I probably have a little bit of it, but because I'm an idiot, I flint knapped indoors for a little while, and you would wake up in the morning and it was gross. Bloody nose and things like that. Obsidian is even worse when it comes to the dust. The cherts and things, they tend to be a little heavier and not as fine flaking, so that stuff really falls to the ground pretty quick. But the obsidian is this microscopic super dust, and no matter what, when I even work on this stuff outdoors, I end up with this. It looks like I have glitter on, because it's all over me, and it's just scary. And if you do it indoors, there are filters out there that can sort this stuff out, but most homes aren't equipped with them. And once this stuff becomes airborne and you have central AC, central heat, it is just going to continue to blow it around your house, and everyone who comes in your house will be breathing it. So flint knap at your people you don't like's house. Let's see. When you flint knap, if you do this at home, you're going to want to take your debitage, all the flakes and the stuff that's left on the ground that you're not going to use, you're going to want to get rid of it. You're going to want to bury it, is what I recommend. I don't like to throw it in the garbage. I like to dig a hole and bury it out of respect for the stone. The stone is the bones of this earth, our earth mother. These are the bones. It's the oldest living entity, and it took millions of years for this to be created, depending on your belief system, thousands of years to make, and I want to honor it by respecting it and by taking my time and understanding it and not just beating the crud out of it. And when you do bury it, you, for the purpose of archaeological record, throw a penny in, throw something in there that could be dated. You never know who's going to dig it up. That's very important. I believe in that wholly. And one other thing you want to add to your toolkit is, this looks like an everyday ordinary pen. It cost me about $8, but it's a diamond scribe. When you make points, sign them. Write initials on them. Date them. Do something so that if you give it to someone, they can't turn around and sell it as authentic. We don't want to pollute the archaeological record. We want people to know that it's modern. And it is an art form nowadays as well. And I have a really cool story about signing a point. There's a guy named Greg Nunn. He's an incredible napper. I think he has a nice video out. I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's pretty good. There was a woman in Colorado, I think it was Colorado or Montana, was out walking her dog and found a stone point. She took it somewhere to be authenticated, showed it to someone, something along that lines, and he was looking at it and was like, "Oh my God, this is such a fine specimen." What? Pulls out the little eyeglass thing, and he's like, "None, 07 or whatever, 05." It's like, what? Nope, this isn't authentic. She's like, "What do you mean it's not authentic?" So basically, it ended up in the newspaper, and there was an article in somewhere in Colorado or Montana about this woman finding this arrowhead, and he lives in like southern Georgia or something. And the article ended up getting sent to him. Someone saw it and sent it to him. And it's pretty neat to, I've lost many arrowheads in the forest. If I couldn't find the deer, if I didn't get a good shot and that deer got away, my arrow's gone with that deer. Who knows where it is? I always try to find, I'll search for 3 days for that animal, 4 days if I can, and if I can't find it. And I hunt in a small area, so I can pretty much cover the whole ground and, literally doing a grid pattern. And I've lost several arrows, and they're all signed. And I'm kind of glad that I did that, because some kid or someone will be walking through there and they might find it and try to sell some primo point for $5,000 or something, and someone's going to be like, "Nope, sorry, it's not authentic. It's worth $3." So always sign your stuff. Always date your debitage. What's that? Well, if you were to write your name and address and telephone number on there, yeah, I guess it would. But I just write some initials and date it. So if they're not finding me, they've tried to find me. Let me tell you. I actually found a guy. I was hunting this spot, and there was this buck we called Windwalker. Every time this deer would come around, the wind would shift in his favor. Every time. He was the biggest deer in our woods. When he was 2 years old, his body was like the size of a small cow, and his antlers were really little, and I was just like, oh my God. And my friend saw it, and I saw it in the same day, and we were just like, did you see that 8-point? It's like, yeah. See the size of its body? I'm like, yeah. It came right up to me, and as soon as it did, the wind shifted, and he checked me out, and he split and walked around me and just checked me out. Well, in the snow, this deer came and would check me out. Would come to where he saw me, and people say deer forget, animals forget, their memory isn't very long. I'm talking 3 months later, because this first sighting of this deer was in the early season. 3-4 months later, we had a couple inches of snow on the ground. He walked up to the same bush, peered his head through it, and went the same path around my deer stand. 3 months later, 4 months later. I mean, it was like December, and early September is when I saw him. So they definitely have memory. Well, we were doing some gun hunting, and while we were gun hunting, we heard some kids in the woods. Like, it sounded like a family, actually. It sounded like little kids. And there's a house nearby there, and they have like chairs set up and whatever. And we had a rack of people out there, and there's a farmer who lets us hunt, and he has crop damage permits and stuff like that. But we try to help him out, and it's basically there's two of us that hunt there, but in gun season we'll bring a whole bunch of our friends in there to caretake the herd, and there's snow on the ground, and we hear these kids playing, and next thing you know, it's bam, bam, bam. Deer were moving, and because the people in the woods kind of, I guess, pushed them towards us, and I was just like, oh, here we go. This is going to be bad. And literally, like within a couple days, there's truck tracks off on this one property and footprints coming through the woods and checking all my stands, and I figured out that it was the DNR in our area, Department of Natural Resource Police, coming and looking for me and us. But and I found their tracks in the snow all the time, but I always go to the places where they only know I go in, the stands. I don't go to my stands after gun season because they're there looking for me. So I always go to like blinds at that point and shift my patterns so they can't pattern me. But I've never been caught. Not that I need to be caught because I'm not doing anything wrong. But never been seen by the DNR. Been shot at by police, though, accidentally. I was in a ground blind and had to go to the bathroom, got up, walked by, and pow, pow, pow! And I'm like, what the heck? And there's a cop sitting in a car shooting out of his car with his pistol. And I'm just like creeped away and was like left real quick, you know? And then I called my brother-in-law, who's a cop, and was like, yo, because this, where he was park property, which my brother's park police. It's like, do you guys give permission to people there? And he's like, no. I was like, all right, well, here's his car number, blah, blah, blah. He's hunting with a pistol and, you know, whatever. And we called DNR on them, and that's the reason why DNR are in there, because we've caught the police in there illegally hunting. And it's really funny. Call the police on the police. Yeah. So, now I'm going to get into this, how it works. This is the fun part. What you need to know about this to work is this is to remove a spall. You need a couple of things to be present in a stone. For one, it has to be nappable. It has to be a nappable grade stone. Nappable grade stones are cherts, obsidians, jaspers, quartzite, argillites, any of the ites. They have a crystalline structure. Obsidian does not have a crystalline structure. The cherts and things do. They're like 99% crystalline structure or quartz structure. And they nap very well. And what you need to have present for this is, I'll draw it on the board and then I'll show you, is a less than 90-degree angle. Okay? For where you're going to hit the stone. Because if it's 90-degree angle, you basically have a flat surface, a square edge. And then you are basically driving a cone directly into the stone, and it is going to be the whole cone going into the stone, not just a portion of the cone, which is what you're using. So you want less than 90-degree angle. And a perfect example of that is right here. Do you see that? I can get into that right there. I can also, and over here, you guys, if you didn't see it, right here, less than 90-degree angle. Surface to surface. Right here, this point is less than 90-degree angle between these two surfaces. I also have it here. Though it's a rounded, it's still less than 90 degrees. Okay? Now, this area, I am going to refer to it as a platform. The platform is where you hit the rock with your billet, hammerstone, your percussion implement. The platform is where you hit the stone. Another thing you're going to want to have present is a convex surface. Not a concaved surface. Energy travels over the convex surface. It will not travel over a concaved surface. You also want a ridge, like a ridge of a mountain. You would want a ridge like this is considered a ridge. Okay? Right here. That would be a ridge. That would be a ridge. Okay? For you in the back. Ugh. This would be a ridge. See, now you know how I get so... The ridge does not necessarily have to be present to remove a spall or a flake, because if it is a convex surface in all directions, that acts as a very broad ridge, okay? It's like a knoll or a hill in a landscape terminology. So those are your main points. Less than 90 degree angle, convex surface, ridge. Now this 90 degree angle has to be a stout, or not 90 degree angle, the less than 90 degree angle has to be a stout angle. This here, remember how I mentioned that when you remove a flake, which right here you can see I've removed some material. This is very thin. I would not hit it right there. It's very thin. This would not hold up. This is not ideal for striking. I would get rid of some of this, prepare it, and then remove my flakes. Ugh. Something else you need to know about this is how you hold the rock. You're holding, I'll have to draw this, and then I'll demonstrate it. The angle at which you hold the stone is going to determine how far your flake travels, or your spall, how large your spall is going to be removed. In conjunction with the size of your hammerstone or your billet, which should be, you might want to go back in your notes to your hammerstone and billets, should be 3 to 4 times, kind of like your deadfall, 3 to 4 times the weight of the spall that you're removing or flake that you're removing. So these are my knees. Okay? That is my hammerstone. And this motion is going to be a constant. When I'm removing or using a billet or hammerstone, this is what I'm doing. It is, your arm is a hammer. Arm and hammer. Okay? This is a constant motion. This does not change. This does not change. When I teach this one-on-one, I have people do this and just tap the edge of their stone 50, 100 times before they actually take that final swing, because you're formulating a connection. Okay? You're forming muscle memory. Okay? This does not change. What changes is the angle at which you hold your stone. Now I'm only going to draw knees, so you don't think that they're like knees on top of knees. That's the rock is in red. The brown is the flake and force. If I hold this rock to the inside of my leg, slanted in at this angle, and I hit it on my platform, I'm going to run a long, short, or medium flake. Short. That's the first one there. The angle, the cone will just barely run off the side of this stone. It'll be a very short flake. This is very important to know. This is one of the things that I struggled with in the very beginning, and it slowly came to, by accident. Well, how did I do that? I did that a lot. How did I do that? Oh, man, what? What? How did I do that? What did I do? I had no formulation of what I was doing. I had these notes, but I didn't, I'm reading them and going, what am I doing that's making it work? What am I doing that's not making it work? Things, you think you set it up right, and then you blow it into pieces, and you're like, well, I did everything the way I did it the first time, and whatever. So the next is, if I hold it flat on my leg, I'm going to run a little bit longer of a flake. And then if I tilt it out like this, then I'm running an extremely long flake. If I go too far and have my angle too steep, my holding angle too steep, and I hit my platform, I'm going to drive that flake directly into the center of that stone, and you're basically running your cone like that right into the stone. All right? That you do not want to do. If you do that, you're going to end up with things called step fractures and hinges. Let me see if I have an ideal step fracture to show you. Basically, what a step fracture is, a flake will come off of the rock. If you hit the rock, the flake will come off and pop off the bottom. The energy goes into the stone, and this angle here would be called a step, where the flake shears off. Instead of it coming off nice and thin at the end, it'll come off with a square edge, and it will leave in your stone another square edge, like this. Okay? These are basically step fractures and hinges. That's actually a hinge. That's kind of a hinge. That's a hinge. That's a hinge. There's step fractures are squared on the edge. Hinges are rounded. And it's basically from sending the force too far into the stone. And what it does is it goes in to a point. It can't travel anymore. And it goes to the path of least resistance, straight out, in whatever direction. You're either going to end up with a spall or a piece broken into pieces, a rock broken into many pieces, because it's either going to go deeper in or out. And I've had pieces just break right in half because of it. So that is something you want to be aware of, and that is a direct result of a bad holding angle. And you'll know when you're doing it. You'll know when you're doing it. And they can also be caused by not enough force. It's not just holding angle. It's not enough force. If you don't have the right size percussion implement and you hit a stone, if that energy, and you've got the, well, it still has to do with holding angle, but if it's not heavy enough and you don't have the right force and you're trying to run a long flake off, and it won't go in. It won't travel off and run that path that it's supposed to or you're trying to do. So you need a combination of the correct holding angle and the right tool for the job. Does that make sense? Because it's, there's a lot going on there at that point. Another thing you want to be aware of is what we call center line. Is this someone's water bottle? I found it up here earlier. I'm going to show you guys something. Let's pretend that this water bottle is my rock. All right, I'm holding this horizontal, and the water is showing you my center line of my stone at this angle, okay? I've got a square edge here, right? To be able to remove this square edge, I need to adjust my center line. Now, right now, the center line is here because that's the way I'm holding the stone. The center line moves with the angle that you hold your stone. If I turn my stone this way, there's my center line. All right? You see that? Now, when you remove a flake or a spall, it needs to be below the center line where you strike it on the platform. The platform needs to be below center line. So, if I wanted to remove a flake off of here, I could hold my stone at this angle and strike it up here and take off a portion of this square angle. Or on this end, where there's already a less than 90 degree angle, I can hold it like this and strike it and remove a flake there. All right, does that make sense? It's a good visual aid as the water bottle. So here, if I was to try to remove a flake here, I would need to adjust my platform so that it was below center line or at center. All right? You can work at center, but not above. You don't want to be above because that's when you're going to run into problems. And again, that is A lot of these rules, when you get better at flint knapping and more experienced, you can bend them. All right? You can bend the rules a little bit. But for now, let's just say you can't. Let's assume that you can't. It's the plane at which runs right directly through the stone. And inside this stone, you have to imagine what is your finished piece, whether it's in a big rock or this little rock. Am I going for this, I'm going to be just taking off many spalls. In the end, though, I will have one of these right in the middle of there. You know what I'm saying? This basically came out of one of these. This is the center of, or not this one in particularly, but you will create one of these if you do it right out of the center and have a ton of spalls to make smaller ones of these. Centerline changes, right. Centerline changes. So if I've got this mass that I want to remove, and it's right now, it's above centerline. Well, if I flip the rock over, it's now below centerline. If I hold it like this, it's above centerline. If I hold it like this, it's below centerline. It changes with the angle that you hold it. So now, I want to show you this technique of how this works. You hear how it has a nice ring to it? That's how you know a good knappable grade stone. High pitch, yeah. All right, we are going to go. Now, right now, this angle right here is a little bit above center line. I wouldn't really want to hit that. I would have to bring it down. I'd have to bring my platform down to remove a flake there, and it wouldn't be ideal. Also, there's a concavity behind it. There's a little dent there. So what I want to do is flip this puppy over. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a little bit here. I'm going to start here and clean this edge up and make a surface over here to work. So I've got my less than 90 degree angle. I've got my strike is going to be right off this tip here. Right here. I've got my less than 90 degree angle. I've got what I would call a slight ridge. And it's almost convex up here. I'm not going to go for anything big at first because I'm just preparing to start working this stone and make this surface more usable to produce what I need to produce. And normally when I work a piece of rock this big, I do this on the ground. I'll dig a hole, pile up the dirt, and rest it on there and change the angles. I don't like to work this big stuff on my leg at first. Ugh. Yes, the spalls come off the bottom of where you're striking. So when I hit it here, the flake comes off the bottom. So now, when I hit this, good God. When I hit this is my constant. And I'm going for a short flake. So I'm going to hold this relatively flat and support it. I'm holding it pretty much flat. So now I'm basically taking aim. I'm making my connection. Now, to show you what, there was my ridge. This was my ridge. There's a little bit of a concavity here, and this here area is from old flakes, so energy's not going to travel across there. There's my striking platform. If you notice, it's about an inch up from the very edge. You don't hit it on the very edge. You want to hit it up on the platform a little bit. Depending on the size of the stone is going to dictate how far up that platform you're going to hit it. As your stones get smaller, as your spalls and flakes and bifaces, whatever gets smaller, your platform and where you strike it gets closer and to the edge, and your percussion implements change and get smaller so that you can hit that spot. So now, this is the flake that came off. It didn't travel very far. There's clay inside here. There's a pocket of clay right in the middle of this rock. So that force couldn't travel through there. But what it did was it created another ridge for me to follow. See that? But it did exactly what I wanted it to do. I didn't know that pocket of clay went in there. I would have hoped that it would have cleaned off some of this. And inside here, there is possibly an arrowhead. Probably not, because there's a lot of this limestone on here, which chert is forms in limestone. Where there's limestone, you have a good chance of finding chert. So let's see how much there is on there. So that's a lot of limestone on there. But yeah, it looks like I'm getting to a point where there's a nice piece of rock in there. So I can use that as a arrowhead blank eventually. Now what I'm going to do is going to keep moving down the line here and using these ridges that I create to remove more and more. So that basically set me up for my next. And here's another. This right here, that's all you need. Okay? Gut an animal, skin it. It actually fits perfectly in my hand. I've got this sharp edge here. I can process meat with this. I can carve a notch in my fireboard with it. I can do various tasks with it. There you go. I'm done. Carry this around. So that's what we're trying to create, is a sharp edge. Flint is basically formed in chalk beds out in Europe. There is no true flint in this country. The closest is chert, and it grows in limestone, forms in limestone. Let's see what we're going to get here. Now I'm holding my angle. I'm trying to get some nice spalls off of this thing. Take off. That was in my way. There was a little bit of a thin edge there that I can remove because it's making me think I got more area to hit it. I'm going to try and hit this up a little bit higher, a little bit harder, bigger rock. Yeah, it did all right. I always put them back. It helps me understand what I did. This one, I struck it at the wrong angle just because it's so big and I'm holding it funny. I'm not getting the right angle on it that I want. But I can still, it's usable, serviceable area. Now I can actually prepare this side here and take a flake off the other side. I can strike it in here and use this side here as my next surface to remove something from, and go along and just work down in a series and remove flakes. All right, see, now that's what I'm trying to do, is remove nice pieces, okay? I hit it right there. I hit it right here, okay? Right where that crack is, you can see there's a little white spot. I hit it right there. I'm going to hold my hands under here, and I can feel that this is what I would consider a ridge or use as a ridge, and it followed that ridge, and it petered out. See how it gets nice and thin at the end there? That's what you're looking to do when you remove these flakes. Now, I'm going to talk about this. With every spall or flake that you remove, you're going to have what's called a percussion bulb. That's where the initial strike is. The energy goes in. It makes a major bulb. It's where that major force happened. And then you've got the waves. All right? The concordial fracture is what that's called. Don't ask me to spell concordial. I actually just found out there's a H in there, and I didn't know it. Conchoidal. Inside your rocks, you may find little impurities like this. There's a little spot of limestone in there. Do you see that? Little white spot? that hopefully will be removed if I work this down into something. You've got these very sharp, thin edges. Right here, I consider this a problem. This is something you would want to remove pretty much immediately. If you start working this, you work your problems out first before trying to make a piece. You want to get rid of your problems. Problems that you will find are, I've already covered them, you will find natural steps and hinges just from rocks being moved around in the earth. You will find concavities. You will find pockets of clay. And you will find square edges. Now, square edge removal is done in a way called zippering. This is a perfect example of a square edge. And zippering, this is what I mean by when you get to a certain level of flint knapping, you can bend the rules. Remember I said if there's a square edge or a 90-degree angle, you can't hit it? Well, it's true, but it's also bendable. So I just got rid of a 90-degree edge. You see that? It was square, and now it is not. So now that I did that, I can actually... Now I've got my platform. That's less than 90 degrees. I can abrade it. And now I'm removing flakes from that side. And now you see this is sandstone. Remember how I said I'm not going to hit these direct percussion? What you saw me do on that big rock, that's called direct percussion. That's called direct percussion. This is direct percussion as well, but it's a sliding technique. It's a glancing percussion more than a direct percussion. So now that just sent flakes all the way down to here. And what I'm doing now is on a square edge. What? Yeah, this is the stained glass. I don't usually do this standing up. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm flipping it over. I take a flake, I flip it over, take a flake, and it makes a zipper pattern down the edge. The flakes are running really far, so it's not quite zipper looking. Look at these nice thin cutting tools. So this is how you get rid of a square edge. And if you look, it forms a zigzag pattern. All right? Now that you've seen percussion, I want to show you a couple different techniques of percussion. You saw direct percussion. You saw what I call either glancing or slide percussion. And then there is, and this is always fun, not the best stuff to do it on, but there is called indirect percussion. Depending on what you're doing, you may want to do this for certain situations, making square axes and things. All right, not the perfect spot to do it. This left hand. Oh, this would be, it's one of my billets that I made into a punch. So this would be called a punch. So you can remove flakes like that, all right? So that's what's called indirect percussion. And it's good to use, this isn't the best way to do it. The best way to do it, because I don't do a whole lot of this, so I don't have the proper tools for it, is like a big, nice hardwood paddle that's kind of wide and heavy so that you don't miss. Because when you miss and you crush your fingers, it's not fun. And I watched a guy from Europe make square axes. I mean, the use of the Hertzian cone made square edges to make an axe. And they're the most incredible looking thing in the world. And I sat there in amazement trying to figure out how to do it. And I went home and tried to do it. And I'm just like, I just keep making bye faces. I can't figure this out. And the dude wasn't very helpful because... So that's one way to... Another way to remove flakes, indirect percussion. There's also... Huh? Are you using the same angle that you were? Yes, angles are all the same. There are also what's called anvil percussion. Now this is carry one of these around. This is an anvil technique. See if I can get it to work. I don't use this way very much either, but it is a way to remove flakes. And you're basically taking the edge. And these flakes are going to be shooting up in my face. So this is when you're going to want to have... Okay, you see the flakes coming off? Watch it. And they're coming off. As long as you got that platform, you see that? The flakes are coming off. So you can sit there and do that and make a bye face as well. I've done it once in my life. Well, now twice. But you can see these. Look at that nice little scalpel blade. I could half that into a stick, and I've got myself a little knife. Okay? It's perfect. And I got another one. And I still have a million more in here, you know? Another holding technique is like this, where you're basically holding it like this, and I don't ever use this either because I don't like my flakes flying everywhere, but it could come into play in certain situations. There's other ways of doing it where you hold it in the ground. If you're trying to remove a big flake, certain types of Danish daggers, if you're making Danish daggers, I see a guy who used Eric Callahan, great Danish dagger maker, and he does this to remove flakes and props it down between his feet in the ground and swings like this. Okay? That is just different ways of percussion. It comes off towards you.